Sandra Lee's public image is often reduced to a single idea: the dermatologist who made medical procedures go viral. But that framing misses the deeper story of a woman who built something unconventional in a world that usually rewards predictability. By the time she reached her mid-50s, she had already spent years reshaping how people think about medicine, empathy, and visibility. Her journey wasn't a straight line toward fame, nor was it designed around attention. It was the result of steady work, unusual courage, and an instinct for connection that turned clinical spaces into moments of shared humanity. While many professionals in her field stayed behind closed doors, she stepped toward the public, not to perform but to reveal. And in doing so, she created a career that defied easy categories. What emerged was not just a doctor or a media figure, but someone who transformed discomfort into understanding and curiosity into compassion at a scale few could have predicted. Early foundations and the making of a determined mind long before cameras or viral videos. Sandra Lee's life was shaped by discipline and persistence. She did not grow up surrounded by privilege or industry connections that might smooth a professional path. Instead, she moved through education and medical training with a steady focus on earning every opportunity. Dermatology was not chosen for glamour or prestige, but for its complexity and its direct impact on people's lives. Over time, she built her identity as a board-certified dermatologist in Upland, California, a place far removed from the attention of major medical hubs. Her early career was defined by routine, long hours, and patients who came to her with conditions that often carried emotional weight as much as physical symptoms. These years formed the backbone of her approach: careful listening, patience, and a belief that even the most private struggles deserved dignity and attention. Medicine at the intersection of skin and identity dermatology, unlike many medical specialties, deals with what people cannot hide. Skin conditions affect not only health, but also confidence, relationships, and self-perception. Sandra Lee understood this deeply in her daily practice. Patients often arrived carrying more than physical discomfort. They brought embarrassment, anxiety, and years of avoiding mirrors or social situations. In those clinical encounters, she developed a communication style that was calm, clear, and disarming. She didn't rush past the emotional reality of her work. Instead, she acknowledged it directly, creating space for patients to feel seen rather than judged. This sensitivity became central to her practice. Over time, she realized that treatment wasn't only about procedures or results, but also about restoring a sense of normalcy to people who had quietly withdrawn from parts of their lives. That understanding would later become the foundation for everything that followed. The quiet spark before the cameras arrived, before social media entered her life. Sandra Lee's work existed entirely within the walls of her clinic. There were no expectations of public recognition, no strategy for online visibility, and no ambition to turn her profession into entertainment. Yet something about her interactions with patients carried a natural openness. She explained procedures in ways that reduced fear rather than amplifying it. She treated conditions others might avoid discussing. When digital platforms began reshaping how people shared experiences, she saw an unusual possibility forming, not for fame, but for education and connection. The idea of showing real dermatological work, unfiltered and honest, began to take shape. It wasn't driven by marketing instincts, but by a belief that transparency could reduce stigma. If people could understand what actually happens in a dermatologist's office, perhaps they would feel less alone in their own medical struggles. The first steps into an unfiltered digital world when Sandra Lee began recording her procedures. The approach was simple and unpolished. There was no production team, no carefully curated branding, and no attempt to sanitize the reality of medical work. What she showed was direct and sometimes uncomfortable, but always honest. At first, the audience was small, but something unexpected happened. People stayed. They didn't just watch briefly. They returned, shared the content, and engaged with it in ways that surprised even her. The reaction wasn't purely curiosity. Many viewers described feeling calmer or more informed after watching. Others expressed relief at seeing conditions they had experienced but never talked about openly. Without intending to, she had tapped into a space where education, empathy, and fascination overlapped. The camera became less of a performance tool and more of a bridge between clinical reality and public understanding. Growth that outpaced expectation and control as the videos spread. The response grew far beyond what anyone involved could have anticipated. Viewership expanded rapidly, reaching audiences across countries and cultures. The appeal wasn't rooted in spectacle alone, but in trust. People sensed that what they were seeing was real, not staged or exaggerated for attention. Sandra Lee's calm demeanor during procedures became part of the experience, grounding even the most intense visuals in professionalism. The growth of her channel reflected a broader shift in digital culture, where authenticity began to matter as much as production quality. Yet with visibility came complexity. The work she had once done privately was now being consumed globally, interpreted in countless ways by strangers. Still, she maintained the same clinical focus, treating each procedure as she always had, regardless of the audience watching from behind screens. From online presence to television phenomenon, the transition from digital content to television marked a turning point in Sandra Lee's career. When TLC developed a series around her work, it formalized what had already become a cultural phenomenon. The show brought structure, production, and a wider platform, but the core of it remained unchanged. Real patients, real conditions, and real outcomes. What made the program resonate was not sensationalism, but transformation. Viewers saw individuals who had lived with visible conditions often return to a sense of confidence after treatment. Sandra Lee became a recognizable figure not because she performed for the camera, but because she remained consistent in its presence. The show expanded her reach, but also reinforced the central truth of her work: that medicine, when practiced with care and attention, can be deeply human storytelling without ever needing to be fictionalized. The audience that found something unexpected as her visibility grew. So did the diversity of her audience. People who had never shown interest in medical content found themselves drawn to her work. Some watched out of curiosity, others out of personal connection to similar conditions. Many described an unexpected emotional response, not necessarily tied to the medical procedures themselves, but to the sense of relief and dignity restored to patients. The reactions revealed something broader about human attention. That discomfort, when framed with empathy, can become engaging rather than repelling. Sandra Lee's presence became a steady point in this evolving landscape. She was not performing emotion, she was simply remaining present with it. That consistency helped shape a community of viewers who returned not for shock, but for reassurance that healing in many forms was possible and often visible in small, quiet transformations. Building a career that became its own ecosystem over time, Sandra Lee's work extended beyond clinical practice and television. She developed educational content, a skincare line, and a recognizable professional identity that existed independently of traditional medical pathways. What made this expansion distinct was that it grew organically from her existing work, rather than being engineered as a brand strategy. Each extension of her career remained connected to the same principle: accessibility. She made dermatology less intimidating, both visually and conceptually. While many professionals remain confined to institutional spaces, she moved fluidly between clinic, camera, and public engagement. This adaptability created a self-sustaining ecosystem where medicine, media, and communication reinforced one another. Yet, despite the scale of her reach, the foundation remained the same: individual patients and the trust built in one-on-one interactions. A private life balanced against public visibility behind her professional success. Sandra Lee's personal life followed a quieter, more complex trajectory. Her long marriage to fellow dermatologist Dr. Jeffrey Rubish reflected a partnership built on shared understanding of medicine and its demands. Together, they navigated the challenges of running a practice while one partner gradually stepped into public visibility. This balance required adjustment, communication, and respect for different comfort levels with attention and exposure. While her public identity expanded, her private world remained more contained, shaped by family, routine, and the realities of maintaining stability amid growing fame. The contrast between public recognition and private life is rarely simple, and in her case, it required ongoing negotiation between visibility and privacy, between professional evolution and personal grounding. Midlife reflection and the weight of continuity. Reaching midlife brought a different kind of reflection, not defined by crisis but by awareness. Years of constant work, public exposure, and emotional engagement with patients naturally accumulate into something heavier and more complex. For Sandra Lee, this stage was not about stepping away, but about reassessing direction. Careers built in the public eye often create an illusion of permanence, yet the reality is more fluid. Health, energy, priorities, and perspective all evolve. At this stage, she continued her work, but with a deeper sense of what it required emotionally and personally. The focus shifted subtly from expansion to sustainability, from growth to balance. It is in this phase that many professionals either withdraw or redefine their relationship with their work. And for her, the path leaned toward continued engagement with greater intention rather than reinvention. The human thread running through every chapter across every stage of Sandra Lee's journey. One element remains consistent: the human connection at the center of her work. Whether in a clinic, on screen, or in digital spaces, her presence has always been grounded in direct engagement with people's vulnerabilities. The conditions she treats are visible, but the emotions surrounding them are often hidden. Her ability to acknowledge both has defined her impact more than any platform or form ever could. What she offers is not simply medical treatment, but recognition. An understanding that discomfort and insecurity are part of shared human experience. This thread connects her earliest days in practice to her global audience, forming a continuity that explains why her work resonates across such different contexts. A story still in motion, not yet concluded. Sandra Lee's story does not resolve into a final chapter because it is still unfolding. At 55 and beyond, she remains active in her profession, continuing to treat patients and engage with audiences who have followed her work for years. There is no definitive endpoint to a career built on ongoing practice and evolving communication. Instead, what exists is continuity shaped by experience. Her journey reflects the reality that professional identity is not fixed but constantly redefined through time, choice, and circumstance. The narrative is not about arrival, but about persistence, adaptation, and presence. What began as a traditional medical career expanded into something broader, yet it remains anchored in the same principle: showing up for people in moments when they are most vulnerable and doing so with consistency, care, and attention that does not depend on scale or recognition.